Welcome to our new episode of Speak Revenue. Remember, revenue is not a goal, it's a result. But a result of what? In this show, we turn our eyes from the output towards the inputs. We speak to sales leaders and entrepreneurs about their journeys. Join us on our quest to uncover and learn the root causes of success. Let's unpack what works for them and what did. Today with our guest, Lydia Winn. Welcome, Lydia. So great to have you here. Thanks for taking your time.
Thomas, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So let's get started right away. Tell us who you are, what you do. Why are you so successful?
Great question. You're giving me a chance to do my favorite thing, Thomas, which is talk about myself. And
Nice.
I've really built my life around growing relationships with great talent. Professionally speaking, I have spent the last 6 years selling into what we in America call state, local, and education. First at a company called Go Guardian, and now at an incredible company called SmartPass. We sell into K-12 education, and at Go Guardian, I had the privilege from seeing us grow from 35 million to 175 million and seeing my own team grow from 6 to 32 people. And I also saw talent grow from BDRs all the way to enterprise reps and managers. And that was really the privilege of my life. And now I have the opportunity to do that same thing at SmartPass. And we sell digital hall pass solutions to K-12. We allow administrators to regulate and track movement that used to be done through paper or physical hall passes, and we're growing really quickly as well.
Right. Seems like there really is some demand in that sector. Very impressive. The growing is from 6 to 35 people within which time range?
From about 2018 to 2023. About 5
5 years.
years.
Great. Yeah, so many challenges to cover there. Let's go into this a bit in more detail in a minute. Maybe you could give us a quick overview on your current goals of this year, goals of next year.
Absolutely. Our real goal at SmartPass was to take our company from, I would say, truly small to maybe the first year of 3 years of hypergrowth. And so when I started at the company, we had just taken venture capital from extraordinary experienced investors, and they were starting to bring on their first sales team. We started with a team of 5 people, and it was their very first year. And so we saw growth just about 4x year over year from 2022 to 2023. We're really tasked with continuing that growth trajectory, expanding our impact, and of course, taking over market share. And to do that, we're looking at what marketing channels make sense, where are the leads going to come from, who are the ideal hires for this team as we continue to grow, and where does it make sense for them to focus on as we go into 2024.
All right. So that's very lot of different tasks to cover to really achieve hyper growth. Very challenging. How far did you already get with your sales process from lead generation over closing to upsell? Is it something dynamic you're still working on, or is it already an established process?
Ooh, great question. Part of the reason I love working at growing companies is that I can essentially live many different lives and see different processes work at different times in the company's life cycle. When SmartPass was starting out, our sales process really relied on simply showing people the product. That was the biggest barrier, was people had never thought about replacing physical hall passes, but there was product market fit, there was adoption, and we simply had to have more people see it. And now, because we are starting to get adoption, we've grown very quickly, more and more people are familiar with it. And part of our sales process now leans more on district level expansion. So essentially, if your neighbor is using us, you're going to get a call from SmartPass. We want to share it with you. Whereas in the past, every single school in the United States was pretty much greenfield. That has changed our lead generation process, and our sales process has changed because we're now doing something slightly more consultative, a little bit more based around the decision process as opposed to education, like strict education, like this is what our product does. And that has been an incredible journey for the company and for the operations team as I work with operationalizing that in HubSpot, which is our CRM.
Okay, when it comes to onboarding and customer retention, in my experience, it's sometimes not easy for a very young company to really focus on retention. It's in many cases just about getting as many clients as quick as possible. How are you handling this? Is there solid customer success team?
Great question. That was actually part of the conversation I had before I even came to SmartPass was what does your retention look like? I have seen so many companies come out of the gate with an incredible promise and a great offering, and then they'll see churn of 50%. And it makes customer acquisition cost and lifetime customer value, it completely distorts that ratio and makes the business unsustainable until that churn is resolved. What I see when I hear you have 50% churn is you have great go to market, but maybe your product market fit is fundamentally lacking when it comes to user adoption. So SmartPass already had very strong retention, even without a customer success team in 2022. We had the privilege, though, of bringing on a brand new customer success team this year. And now we're in the process of experimenting. What does it look like to give people an extraordinary experience that is going to leave them raving about SmartPass while not overburdening them with information, getting them the right information at the right time? And because there are so many school sites and now we have so many customers and we only have a 6-person team, how can we automate that and send people through an academy so they can get the right information at the right time and they don't have to wait on a human being to deliver it?
That sounds interesting. Would you say especially in your business, ICP is not a very big issue? Just for me, looking into it as an outsider, it would be all schools, basically. But more narrow your ICP is, the less customer retention, probably. Would you agree on that? Or is it something I see wrong? So maybe it's even more challenging than I expect.
Great question. The ICP in K-12 can be a little bit of a mystery if you're coming from B2B and you know the personas CFO, CTO, CEO. That being said, I always urge people not to get too intimidated just because it's a vertical SaaS situation. For SmartPass, again, ideal customer profile is evolving. We're starting to sell as much to individual school sites and really hardworking forward thinking principals as we are to hardworking, forward thinking district administrators. And the question of what does that look like in terms of decision making is still something that we are figuring out. And that's a challenge compounded by the fact that most school districts have actually never bought a digital hall pass solution. They've certainly purchased curriculum, they have purchased other tools, they've purchased security, they've purchased networking. This is just a new category. And so a lot of what the sales team is learning, what the customer success team is learning is what does that decision making process, what does the project of rolling it out look like at a district, and what does it look like at a school site? If we're selling to a district, typically we're selling to a CTO or a superintendent. If we're selling to a school site, we are selling to confidentially my favorite people in the whole universe, which are principals.
Awesome. That's a nice, that is a very nice position for you. That's interesting that it's a very new market, obviously, and not a lot of educational thing or the tasks you're covering with your go-to-market approach. Did I understand that correctly?
What we're really thinking about is what does education at scale look
Hmm.
like? What does
Okay.
branding and awareness look like for a new category? Something that is distinct about K-12 is, and part of the reason I really love K-12 is that it is inherently non-competitive. And so when one school finds something that they love, there's no disincentive to share it with everybody they know. They love going to conferences and sharing their ideas with their peers for the same reason. There are no secrets in K-12 because there's no need for there to be secrets, right? We're just trying to support the education of our student body wherever we are. And in K-12, events are huge. It's a great way to educate people at scale. And part of the reason I knew SmartPass was going to be a good fit was because I saw the response at conference and we had so many people huddled around the booth. What we're working on now is how do we improve and build out our SmartPass Academy, which is our online training and distribution? How do we create videos, social media posts? How do we, I think the biggest thing we can do is create evangelists within school districts who can educate their peers in the language of that district with their district's unique situation in mind. And that's an ongoing project, especially creating, I would say, ambassadors or evangelists and getting them potentially certified is something we're looking at as they go out and they share what we're about and support their own district in getting started.
Okay. It sounds like a very motivating market ecosystem you're working in.
I think something I have learned over my career is working in a vertical that I geek out about. There's no substitute for it. It will make me spend the extra 20 minutes each night answering that email or putting together a resource for my team because it is fundamentally something that interests me. And I think that is why I have spent now over half a decade in K-12 education is because it is something I geek out about. It is objectively really interesting to me.
So that's probably some advice you would give to potential team members or probably any person. So maybe we could talk about this a little bit. How do you handle team development, especially sales rep development in a transactional sales environment?
Ooh, there are so many things about that. Because we are doing a more transactional sale, I have the distinct privilege of working with a lot of early career salespeople. And so I have the chance to shape and mold people that might be in their first sales job, might be in their second sales job. Because this is a more transactional sale, the great thing is they're going to get so many at bats and those initial mistakes, those experiments that they try that might not work, wash out. It's okay. You're going to do 250 deals in a given year, and you can always try something else. Where it becomes a challenge is organization. And again, how do we deliver that extraordinary experience to 250 schools as they come through one account executive or a BDR that might be booking 250 meetings in a year, which sounds intimidating, it's pretty routine, especially season for it. And again, a
Yeah.
compounded challenge for K-12 is it's very seasonal. And so what I've worked with from our ops team is creating deal stages that are binary. So moving something from, in our case, prospecting to buy-in. That simply requires a rep has a follow-up meeting on the books. The prospect has to have accepted that meeting. There has to be an agenda for it. And it's a yes, no. Because there's going to be, in my case, sometimes 1,000 deals in pipeline at any time, I simply don't have the bandwidth to go in and do a more traditional deal inspection like I would an enterprise deal for all 1,000 deals. What I need to do as a manager is ensure accountability and adherence to the system. And I will give a huge hat tip to Jamie Buss at Zendesk for creating what I think is one of the best resources about forecasting.
Okay. What's maybe you could talk about the team development topic just for a minute. Do you have any specific coaching approach?
Yeah, I am a big believer in the one thing at a time rule, especially when it comes to working with early career salespeople. Something I see newer managers fall into is they just forget how long it took them to acquire the fundamentals of sales. So there's that expert novice gap when they're training new salespeople. And I work with early career salespeople. So I also work with a lot of first time managers, which is so much fun. And I now see what the most common mistakes are.
Okay.
So when I'm training someone to do outbound, I really think of it as a 6-part process, right? We're going to go through a couple of what I call outbound magic tricks, easy wins that you can knock out from the beginning. I want to talk about cold calls. I want to talk about messaging matrix. Then I want to talk about emails and sequences. And then I want to talk about objections and objection handling.
Okay.
And again, like deal stages, it's gated. When I see somebody master those basic outbound magic tricks, like a permission based opener, I can move them along to the next phase, which is going to be cold calling. When I see them mastering emails and email sequences, we can talk about objections and objection handling. Same thing when you move into a closing role. I want to talk about agenda setting and rapport. I want to talk about decision maker and upfront contracts. I want to talk about discovering the pain, decision process, negotiation, and then close and post sale. And so we do the one thing at a time rule. When you pass the first stage, you move to the second stage of training. We start working on those skills. And tools like Gong have been absolutely instrumental because I can set automatic trackers that help me know when reps are taking sometimes 7 or 8 calls in a single day. Are they adhering to those fundamentals? Are they ready to move on to the next phase of training and continue developing?
So that's a very individual and situative approach for each single sales rep, right?
It is.
Or would you create cohorts the bigger the team grows?
When we were in hypergrowth at GoGuardian, I created cohorts, but again,
Mhm.
people are going to acquire those skills at slightly different times, even
Yeah,
if they're all
yeah.
extraordinarily talented. Delivering individuated coaching that is still very focused is absolutely key. And I don't think it's actually as much
Mhm.
of a challenge as people anticipate it if you're willing to focus on just the one thing at a time. Where I see newer managers struggle is when they're trying to coach to 6 different things for 6 different people and they're not tracking the efficacy of their own coaching over time and how much the rep
Mhm.
is actually adopting it.
Do you also work with individual dashboards for each separate sales rep, with covering individual KPIs and goals?
Yes.
Mhm.
I try to make sure that those KPIs and those goals are as similar as possible. But when we have a growing and developing team, there's going to be people on ramp. And then there's going to be people who are fully ramped and they're going to have different KPIs. And this is where I originally came from. I had worked with Salesforce for almost a decade. And now I am fully on HubSpot. And that is where I absolutely love HubSpot because creating dashboards that capture these KPIs is incredibly easy. And ideally, after I've been working with the team for a few weeks, I empower them to analyze and understand their own dashboards. And then we start every one on one meeting with the
Okay.
rep presenting that data to me.
So you've mentioned forecasting already, especially in transactional sales and covering the public market. I assume this can be really challenging. So how are you doing that? Maybe on a team perspective, but also individually?
Great question. I think tools like Clary and HubSpot Forecast are phenomenal.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, I have not seen them work for a highly seasonal sale. So, for context, most of K-12 business is done over the summer as preparation for a new school year, right? You have
Yeah,
this,
sure.
in a sense, K-12 schools have their own motion, and so our sales motion follows that buyer journey.
Right.
So, we can't really rely on automated tools for forecasting. And as our sales process becomes more sophisticated in the beginning, it's usually easy because everything is inbound. And forecasting based on inbound just depends on how many of your leads convert and how many leads you got the prior month. But as more of our messaging is done through outbound or through events, that becomes a little bit more challenging to anticipate. And so, what I have really seen, I'll go back to those binary deal stages, is binary deal stages where there's a good understanding of if a school or school district or principal accepts a follow up meeting and they have actually accepted the calendar invite and they show up. Because we have so many deals in flight at any time, we can start collecting data on how many of those deals actually close. And then once they move to that second conversation and maybe they book a time for implementation with a customer success manager, how many of those deals close? What if there's an agenda? Does that
Mhm.
improve the likelihood that they'll attend that meeting and that they'll find value in the solution and ultimately purchase it? The more I can create a consistent process, the more accurate I have found my forecasting. And the benefit of a highly transactional sale is I don't have to wait months and months to test a theory about how a change to the process impacts something like close rate or success rate. And once that is determined, and it usually takes about 6 months for me to figure all of that out at this point, I can forecast within 10% accuracy on any given month.
Nice. So how do you know the process is consistent already?
HubSpot. I love
Okay.
HubSpot for this because HubSpot allows me to see, is there a next meeting scheduled on the calendar? That's a field that can automatically populate. I can also see what the last email to a customer was in HubSpot or to a prospect. And I can see, was there an agenda attached to this? I can see when the last email
Mhm.
was. And so instead of spending my time on individual deals or opportunities in HubSpot, I really spend most of my time looking at lists of deals and looking at those key columns in any given report to ensure that there's consistency. And then when I see that there isn't consistency, that's my opportunity to have a discussion about that particular deal with a rep.
Okay, so because consistency is the depending on how complete the sales process is followed, how complete data is gathered for each separate deal.
Well said.
Okay.
Consistency here is absolutely key. And so when we hire, we look for people that are highly organized and can follow that process
Mhm, mhm.
successfully.
Awesome. That's really interesting. So you've also already mentioned HubSpot, Gong, but also Clary. Is there any additional tool, something you would like to highlight that's important for your specific sales process?
I have become a total evangelist for Notion since I started
Okay.
SmartPass. It has made creating a central deposit for information as we train and onboard people so easy. I was aware of it before I started. I did not realize how powerful it was until I came to SmartPass. So that's been a privilege.
Great. Yeah. I also have nice experience with those and especially with Notion. Let me ask you, would you like, or would you please tell us something that did not work?
I will go back to forecasting. Part of the privilege I had at GoGuardian was I was there long enough to try a lot of things, and not all of them worked. So we tried forecasting based on lead volume. And as again, our lead and go to market became a little bit more sophisticated, that became less accurate and more challenging. I have tried using AI driven forecasting through Clary and HubSpot. We saw some months it worked, but many months it didn't because that seasonality.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. I have tried doing individual deal inspection and we simply didn't have the time. It was stealing time away from my reps. So that lesson about forecasting was absolutely hard won and won through a lot of things that didn't work first.
Looks like that fits pretty good to our topic to really check the causes of results and not only focus on results to set the goals of the next results. When and how did you realize that this forecasting approach is not working?
I think talking to peers, I
Mhm.
realized that accuracy was possible. And so hearing that other people were able to forecast within 10% or even within 3% or 2% accuracy each month was so inspiring to me. I was like a dog with a bone. I could not let that idea go. And so then I was able to set out and start experimenting. And I didn't have the benefit of a ton of experience in transactional sales at the time and didn't know to say, look for companies like Zendesk as opposed to Oracle to model my approach. I found that out through trial and error. But once I found a cohort of like minded people who had reps who are doing 100 to 250 deals in a given year, they already knew the playbook and I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. And that's where I came up with that sort of linear system for moving deals through deal stages as essentially a series of touch points for the potential customer.
Mhm. How long did it take you to find a solution and to correct the process to improve it?
This is why I'm glad I was there for 5 years. It took me about
Okay.
2 years. It took me about two
Really? Okay.
years to
Yeah.
iterate
Yeah.
on it. So
A
I
lot of work.
tell anyone who's struggling through a challenging
Mhm.
problem, stay the course.
Thanks. So maybe a last question. Is there any additional lesson learned you would like to share with the audience? Maybe specifically for aspiring sales reps starting in the business or any other lesson learned you would like to share?
Ooh, I'll go back to what I said in the beginning, which is that I've really
Mhm.
built my career around growing relationships. And so my success as a leader depends on how many talented people trust me and trust me to get them to where they want to go in their career and serve their interests. And so that is what I have built my career around. And I encourage people who are new to sales, whether they're interested in management or not, to focus on those key relationships and hone and develop them over time, whether it's putting a reminder in your calendar for someone's birthday that you really respect and you have a lot of professional love for, or pinning their contact information. I have iOS, so pinning their contact information in your phone so you continue to think of them and remember them. It is those people that I have kept top of mind and continue to keep updated on my career that have helped me find great opportunities like SmartPass, that have helped me be successful, help me direct me to the best resources for my problems, and ultimately have success when I step into a new role. So I really cannot understate the value of nurturing those few key relationships over the course of a career.
All right. Very nice. Sounds great. I think that's very important basic advice for not only people new in the business. So that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you, Lydia Winn, for joining us today, sharing such valuable insights. A huge shout out to all our listeners. Your support means the world to us. Remember to check out our website at speakrevenue.com for a full transcript and additional resources. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and wherever you go for your listening needs. It really helps get the word out. Also, follow us on LinkedIn and Insta or on YouTube. We'll be back soon with another great guest. Until then, stay curious and keep listening.